This is the Mormon Mixed Faith Marriage with Certified Life Coach, Brooke Booth, episode number 150. Okay, this is a topic that gaslighting, self-gaslighting is the topic. And this topic is one I've been exploring sort of multiple dimensions in the last few podcasts and the next few podcasts. This idea of how we, due to our own lack of self-awareness and emotional maturity and emotional development, we fall into some patterns and habits. One of them is self-gaslighting. So I'm going to talk about self-gaslighting today in a podcast coming up. I'm going to talk about spiritual bypass. These are all similar ideas that we do just based on our socialization, not because we're bad or selfish or terrible people. It's just our intention is usually good, but our impact is usually problematic. So with that little bit of an intro, let's talk about self-gaslighting, give you lots of examples, talk about how it looks in a mixed faith marriage. All in this larger theme I'm following of developing more emotional maturity, emotional resilience, emotional vulnerability in yourself and with your partner. Okay, I see self-gaslighting a lot, really a lot with my clients. A little bit more with my female clients, but I definitely see it with both. Here's a definition of gaslighting, and then I'm going to give lots and lots of examples. Gaslighting is the act of invalidating one's own true experience. And we can do this in a multitude of ways. So I'm going to try to give so many examples here, but it's the act of invalidating one's own true experience. So it may look like it can be manifest in a number of ways, like suppressing emotions. So someone might say something insulting, but then the person who's being insulted might think, I'm probably making a big deal out of nothing. Blaming yourself. Someone might blame themselves for ongoing verbal abuse or ongoing indifference or ongoing emotional distance. And they're just, I may not have said the right thing, or I didn't approach that the right way. Minimizing your experience. Someone might convince themselves that an experience of, whatever, sexual assault, emotional abuse, dismissiveness, whatever, wasn't a big deal or wasn't a trauma. I'm overreacting. That wasn't a big deal. It's not a really big deal, is how it might sound. Scolding oneself. Someone might have an initial reaction to something upsetting and then scold themselves for being upset. Why am I so sensitive? Why do I overreact? People may be more likely to gaslight themselves if they grow up in environments where their feelings were often challenged or denied or ridiculed or downplayed. And so you begin to internalize a tendency to discredit your own emotions and your own experiences because they're downplayed, discredited, denied, or challenged, or they're seen as problematic, or they're seen as too much or upsetting the family dynamic. And so then you internalize that and then you discredit your own emotions, your own experience. This is when it becomes internalized. So this is internalized gaslighting. That's what self-gaslighting is. So it's when you have a situation and then now you internalize that and you then become the enforcer on yourself. This also happens if you grew up in a family or wider community that didn't discuss negative emotions or just disregarded emotions as weak altogether or problematic, or things that rock the boat. Maybe you were told not to cry, or that you were too sensitive, or some vein like that. Or maybe you were just always taught to be sweet or polite or agreeable. This is the same thing, just approaching it from a different perspective. And because of this, you may have a hard time letting yourself be anything but sweet and polite. You may have a hard time letting yourself be angry or advocating for yourself in a time of distress because you don't think you're worthy of advocation because you shouldn't be feeling that way or expressing those emotions or acting from a place of emotions. Surprise, surprise, we don't live in a society that generally finds itself comfortable with unpleasant or challenging emotions. It doesn't welcome them. So many, many people grow up learning to disregard their own emotional experience. This was certainly my experience. both in my family and in the larger church. So whatever your reasons, that you picked up for self-gaslighting or this internalized gaslighting, here's some really concrete signs to look for in your mixed faith marriage. If you regularly tell yourself you're being dramatic or overly sensitive when you feel sad, angry, or upset about your faith transition or about your spouse's faith transition or about church history or about a conversation you had with your spouse about polygamy, a conversation you had with your mom about wearing garments or the new style of garments. If you regularly tell yourself you're being dramatic or overly sensitive when you feel angry, sad, or upset. Okay, another idea is you question whether something really happened to you the way you remember it. You question your experience in Young Women's years ago. You question a conversation you had with your spouse on a church topic or a sensitive topic. You question a conversation you had with your parents or an experience you had as a child growing up. You question the content of a lesson or a talk or a general conference talk. And you question whether something really happened the way you remember it. This one's particularly tricky because we all remember things differently, but that in no way makes our interpretation and our experience wrong. You frequently compare your situations to other situations, telling yourself that yours isn't that bad or someone else has it worse. Here's the classic one I hear so much. So much better than it used to be. This is you comparing your current situation with your past situation. So much better than it used to be. You're gaslighting the past and how it once was. I should be grateful to have. Completely gaslighting how you feel about the reality of what you have. At least it's not like sister so-and-so or brother so-and-so. My sister-in-law has it so much worse. At least it's not like my cousin's marriage. These are all examples of you gaslighting your own experience because at least it's not as bad as theirs. It does not diminish the experience you are having. And this is often how we ignore our own emotions and we dull our own emotional awareness and we fail to process our own emotions because of all of these self-gaslighting tendencies. When someone treats you poorly, you tell yourself it must have been your own fault. His emotional distance is because I was too aggressive in making my point. His emotional distance is because I was too passionate about making my own point or too emotional when I made my own point. You beat yourself up for feeling upset by certain situations. I should be able to handle the sacrament meeting talks. I should be able to handle sitting through a Relief Society lesson. I should be able to handle going to this family reunion. That's gaslighting yourself. You're invalidating and ignoring and dismissing the reality of your emotional situation. You second guess all of your decisions, maybe even asking others their opinion because you trust their opinion and their truth more than your own. And maybe I'm wrong about staying in the church. Maybe I'm wrong about leaving the church. I better check with this. I better have a conversation with my mom or my sister or my husband. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're right. Maybe they know something I don't know. Maybe they're a better authority than I am on this topic for me in my life. Like, this is what I want to pause on because, yeah, other people can be a better authority on things like how to fix a washing machine or how to build an engine. But you are always going to be the authority on your own emotions, on your own experience, and on what's best for you in your life. And this is where you second guess your decisions and you ask other people their opinion on things that apply directly to you and your life. That's gaslighting. Another example, when you have a disagreement or any type of conflict with someone and you always assume you're the one in the wrong. I said it too strongly. I should have phrased it a different way. I should have approached that differently. It was my fault. The conversation went south. So if you see this in yourself, you see this in your mixed faith marriage, let me give you some things to consider. Number one is do what you can to cultivate awareness around your gaslighting patterns. Listening to this podcast is a great example. Create a dedicated journal Do something. Start listening to yourself when you're having conversations with people. Start cultivating awareness around your gaslighting patterns. Because ultimately, what you need to do is you need to rebuild self-trust. You need to rebuild trust with yourself. And before you can do that, you need to start being aware of where you're eroding that trust with yourself and stopping that. Otherwise, you're just going to have a cup with a hole in the bottom if you try to build self-trust, but you still continue to gaslight yourself. So cultivate awareness around your gaslighting patterns. Every time you have a thought that gaslights you, try to write it down and be aware. Acknowledge that it's there. You don't need to suppress those thoughts. You don't need to ignore them. You don't need to be ashamed of them. Just need to be aware of them. Another integral tool when recovering from self-gaslighting is self-compassion. Regard yourself as you would a friend. Have patience with yourself. Speak to yourself with kindness. This is part of the building self-trust. You can't have a healthy relationship without compassion. So next time you hear yourself say, I shouldn't be upset about this, try responding with something like, says who? Well, maybe I should be upset about this. Here's something I do personally. One of my primary ways I self-gaslight myself is I tell myself it's not a big deal. And that usually means it actually is a big deal. So what I'll do is when I start to hear myself say it over and over and over about a situation, it's not a big deal, it's not a big deal, I'll pause because I know that's one of my signs when I'm self-gaslighting. And I'll give myself permission to own that maybe this is a big deal and give myself permission to let something be a big deal for me so I'm not gaslighting myself into thinking it's not a big deal. Self-gaslighting is often tricky to see. This one can be hard to see, can be hard to identify. So if you're struggling to create this awareness and then to create this self-compassion, it's okay to get some help. It's okay to reach out to a therapist or a coach and to talk about this in a more structured way and to get more structured help. And this is one of those things when you can stop, slow down, mitigate your own self-gaslighting, your own internalized gaslighting. This is when you can really start to turn the corner around building self-trust again and self-compassion, which can help you tenfold in a relationship because now you're coming back into a relationship so much healthier and stronger and kinder. All right, if you need help with your mixed faith marriage, feel free to go to my website, brookeboothcoaching.com. I have a course, home study, self-guided, self-timed course that is packed with amazing resources to help you in your mixed faith marriage. Other courses too, go and check them out, brookeboothcoaching.com. Wishing you the very best in your journey, self-compassion, in your own mixed faith marriage.